Hey, boss. Welcome to episode 2 of the Sorta Bossy podcast. I'm Adrienne Dorison, also sorta bossy. And today we're going to be talking about why everything is still on your plate, why you cannot delegate, right? And a lot of people think this is because they don't have the right tool or the framework or their people are incompetent, but usually it has nothing to do with that and everything to do with the shift that you need to make in your identity. Okay? So everyone once you started becoming overloaded, right, with work, like there was too much on your plate, you need to hire people, they said. Um and then once you hire those people, you just have to delegate to them and everything will be so much easier. That's usually not what happens, right? Like you hire people and then you try to delegate them to them and things still keep getting thrown back at you, right? Like you're still doing all the things. Things still come back to you, right? And we're taught through like leadership and management training and books and whatever, like even this idea of like the delegation matrix is like a historical model for delegating, right? The 70% rule. Like if someone can do it as 70% as well as you, just hand it off. And like that sounds really reasonable until you're staring at someone else's work thinking, "Oh my god, I could have done this better in half the amount of time." Right? And so you end up taking it back or you end up not handing things off at all because of that fear or that frustration. But most of the leaders that I've worked with over the years don't have as much difficulty solving the delegation skills problem. Like once I give them our delegation framework, which I'm going to talk about in a future episode, once I give them that framework, like that part's pretty straightforward. The challenging part, the reason that they get stuck is because they have an identity problem, right? And no delegation framework is ever going to be able to fix that, right? Because the identity that you built to get here is in complete opposition of the new identity that you need to have, right? You didn't get promoted because you were good at like sitting back and letting other people do things. You got promoted because you were good at doing the work, right? You were thorough, you were reliable, you were the person that people came to when they needed something to get done right. I know you because I am you. Like literally at my corporate job, like people would have whole project ideas and I'd be raise my hand, like give it to me, right? And people knew like, oh, if you want something done, give it to Adrienne, right? Your competence was visible to people and it was valued and it became the thing that you quietly really like built your whole professional identity around, right? Being the best at the work that you were doing was the whole job for so many years. And so for a lot of us, the identity goes even deeper than the job itself. Like if you're anything like me and a lot of the leaders that I work with, we were raised by people that valued hard work, right? It was a value that our parents instilled in us. You need to be a hard worker. Um, and like being a hard worker wasn't just like a skill, right? It was like a moral identity that we hold. It's who we are at our core. And then when you either got promoted into a leadership role or you built a team, someone handed you a team and said, go now lead these people and stop doing the work, right? And no one really explained that the work was going to change in a way that would make you feel at a cellular level that you stopped working hard, right? And that is a rupture that nobody really talks about. Like that's the entire shift is that your identity is being challenged right now as a leader. And so you constantly jump back into the doing because that feels safe. It feels comfortable. It feels like who you are at the core, right? Because the skills that got you here to where you are as a leader, they don't work in your leadership role anymore. And so the instinct that we all have is to like, okay, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to produce. I'm going to do the work because that feels good. It feels right. And so all of that is now directly in conflict with what your new role really requires of you, which is to make other people capable of doing the work without you. That's a hard identity shift to make. Right? But it's the most important one. And that's harder than most leadership training ever acknowledges. Most people just don't even talk about this, right? They just say, well, just do this. Why is that so hard? Just put in this framework. Just tell them to do the thing. It's like, okay. But here's what's happening when you can't delegate or what's happening under the hood here, right? Like Because when leaders tell me that they're struggling to delegate or they delegated something and it still ended up back with them, the reasons that come up, they're like, oh, it's just faster if I do it myself. Or by the time I explain it to someone, I could have just done it. Yeah, maybe, right? That one time. Or maybe they say, like, I've tried handing it off and no one ever does it right. So I'll just redo it myself, or I do it to begin with. Or no one on my team is ready for that thing. Like, so maybe I'll delegate these smaller things, but not this bigger one. And these are real struggles. I'm not dismissing them, right? I've even said them myself many times over the years with different people, with different projects, with different roles, right? But these are symptoms. These are not causes, right? Because underneath almost every one of those reasons that I just shared, if you press hard enough, you're going to find something else, right? You might find like the fear of losing control. Like if someone else owns this, what if it goes wrong? Like, what's going to happen? And if it does go wrong, like, that's now on me. So I'd rather just do it myself, right? So you're trying to hold on to the control. Or the fear of becoming irrelevant. This is a big one that we usually don't ever name, right? But as we delegate, our subconscious starts to think like, if my team doesn't need me to do the work, then what exactly is my value here? Like, what am I even here for? Maybe they're going to fire me, or maybe I'm not even necessary to the team if they're the ones that are able to do all the work. Or maybe you have this like subconscious fear of being exposed. Like, what if I hand this off and they do it better than I do it? Right? Like, what if it's a value or a worth fear coming up? Or just fear of the discomfort. I know that this is true in my parenting, but watching someone struggle to learn and do something is hard, right? Like that's a new learning curve, especially when you know you could do the thing in way less time. It can be genuinely uncomfortable. It can feel unkind. It can feel inefficient. Heck, it is inefficient in the short term because they're going to do it slower than you at first, right? But hopefully you're never going to have to do it again. And so in the long term, it's way more efficient. But as you're watching other people do things, it can bring up all of those frustrations. And none of these are shameful, right? I don't want you to feel shame around them. They're almost universal amongst leaders who were high performers before they became managers and leaders in their roles, right? But they're worth identifying because you can't solve a problem that you don't even know you have, right? Or that you've never identified. So one of the things that I think we fail to talk about when it comes to leadership and delegation is this idea of actually over helping people, right? And this one hurts me a little bit because I know that it was true for me. But when you keep doing the work yourself, you're actually not being a good leader. You're being a comfortable leader, right? You're saving and rescuing people, right? If you step in every time that something gets hard for others so that you can rescue the deliverable or redo the work, or you're hovering so closely that they never have to figure out anything on their own, or you're always available to make decisions for them, right? It might feel like support, but it's not, right? It's really just a crutch for them. And it's a slow way of communicating to them that you don't actually trust them and you don't actually believe that they're capable and that you don't believe they're able to grow and learn these things, right? And so over time, your team is going to learn exactly what you've taught them, which is to bring it to you because you want to handle it, right? That's what you're teaching them when you overhelp and over support in many ways, when you don't show up as a true leader, but as someone that's going to help them through the discomfort of everything, right? And one of my favorite quotes is by James Clear from Atomic Habits. And he says, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it's currently getting. And so it's like, if you are feeling like your current system is not getting the results that you want, you're not like they're not doing the work as effectively as you would like them to do on their own, and things keep coming back to you, it's probably because of this piece right here. It's probably because you trained them to do that. The system in which we've designed trains them to bring things back to you. So we have to undo it, right? You trained them to need you. And then you burned out resenting the dependency that they had on you. It's not a character flaw. It's a pattern, right? It's a system that was built, and those things can be changed. But changing it is going to require admitting that the behavior you've been calling like, oh, I have to hold to high standards or I need to stay involved, that might actually be more about your comfort and your identity than your team's capability. So I want to give you an example that might help you kind of put into context this identity shift that we need to make around this work, right? So I talk about this idea of like digging holes versus solving Rubik's cubes, right? And this is the part that makes the identity shift like so brutally hard in practice. Is that it has nothing to do with something that we're usually really good at, willpower and discipline. The identity shift doesn't have anything to do with those things, right? Otherwise, we would just muscle through it. But the doing work gives you something that the leadership work doesn't give you. And that thing is instant gratification. Because we love a little dopamine hit, right? Like when you execute a task, you get to check off a box like, yay, I did it. Like something is visibly and measurably completed, right? And so you're like, sometimes you'll even write things on the to-do list just to check them off, even though you've already done them, right? And at the end of the day, you can point to like what you built, what you accomplished, what you finished. And it feels hard because it is hard. It's like digging a hole, right? When you're digging a hole, it's physical manual labor. You can see your physical, tangible progress with your own eyes, right? And you get to go home tired, like this physical labor idea, right? You prop your feet up, you feel like you really earned it. But shift over to the leadership work, right? The thinking work, the designing of the team, the developing your people work, the strategy, the visionary elements. This type of work is more like solving a Rubik's Cube, right? It's not physically demanding like digging the hole, but mentally it's usually way more exhausting, right? Because decision making is the most neurologically taxing thing that our brains do. And so if you're making decisions not only for everybody else on the team, but also for yourself, it's exhausting, right? And so here's the cruelest part of the leadership work. At the end of the day, you might look at that Rubik's Cube and it doesn't look any closer to being solved when you started it, right? Like you might have spent 3 hours thinking through a decision or a conversation or a new direction for the team or a big picture strategy that you're trying to see if it's going to work. And you might have nothing to show for it that you can point to or that you can physically check off of a list yet. It might take you months to check something off of a list. Sometimes it takes years, and sometimes that work isn't even done by you, right? But that doesn't really feel like hard work to us sometimes. Sometimes it feels like you wasted your whole day. You're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get anything checked off my list, right? So I'm not getting my dopamine hits like I did from the doing work, right? But I need you to acknowledge that the Rubik's Cube is hard work. It's just a different kind of hard work. And until you acknowledge that, your identity will never make that shift because if you identify as a hard worker, if that's something you value about yourself, then you're not going to shift towards something you don't think is hard work. So you have to start recognizing that the work, yes, is different, but it's also equally, if not harder, right? It's equally hard, if not harder. So it's just a different kind of hard work. And the payoff is delayed in a way that the digging of the hole never is, right? An idea you work through today might not manifest itself for 6 months. Or a conversation that you have with a struggling team member and you had to figure out how to navigate that conversation, that might not show results or improvement or true development in a person for a year, right? And the thinking work that we do, the visionary work, it compounds quietly and invisibly over time. And then one day, your team is able to make decisions that you used to make, and they're solving problems that you used to solve. And then you realize that the Rubik's Cube has been being solved the whole time. It just maybe didn't look that way on each individual day, right? And so the leaders who struggle to make that shift, they're not lazy. They're just probably addicted to the dopamine hits of the doing. And I know it because I was too. Like we get addicted to the box being checked off, the task being done, the visible proof that I worked hard today and I did this thing. And until you're willing to trade that dopamine hit for something slower and maybe something even harder to measure, you're going to keep getting gravitationally pulled back to digging the hole, right? Because at least digging the hole feels like I'm doing something. It feels like an accomplishment. And so recognizing this in yourself, like that's not a criticism. It's actually the beginning of you being able to shift into that new leadership role that you really need to start sitting in. So there's also like one more layer to this emotional piece of the delegation puzzle, which is the guilt. Okay, there's the guilt that keeps leaders stuck long after they intellectually understand everything that we've already talked about, right? The guilt starts to come up. So when you start making the shift from doing to leading the team, and when you start protecting your time and blocking off your time for thinking time and designing time for quote unquote Rubik's Cube work, there's a persistent and uncomfortable feeling that you're not pulling your weight. I hear this all the time. Like, oh, like my team, they're going to think I'm not doing anything. Like, what's my team going to think if I stop doing this work? Right. And oh, maybe I'm not pulling my weight anymore. So you're starting to feel that your team is heads down executing things while you're sitting in a coffee shop thinking about things. And that if they could see your calendar, they'd be like, what the heck does she do all day? And so this self judgment and self projection leads you to start drifting back into the doing. Not because you don't intellectually know better, like you know that that's not what you should be doing with your time, but you feel guilty, and that guilt is louder than the logic, right? And so that guilt, when it's showing up, it's usually a projection. It's usually not, because I ask my clients this. I'm like, what did your team say? What did they say about how you spend your time? Oh, they haven't said anything to me. So then who is saying this? It sounds like your own discomfort in your head, right? It's usually a projection. It's your own discomfort with the designing work being reflected outward onto your team, because it's easier for you to say, oh, they're going to be mad that I'm not doing this work anymore, or that my calendar is more like open and has this free time to do all this thinking and strategy and designing. And honestly, your team is probably not sitting there resenting your thinking time. They don't care probably, right? You are. And that's because you haven't fully accepted that the thinking time is the more valuable work. And I often explain this to my clients is like, okay, but if you're having this feeling, this projection of, oh, the team is going to be, so upset that I'm not spending my time doing the work. They're going to think I'm not valuable here anymore, that I'm not pulling my weight. I'm like, okay, well, if you believed that the thinking work and the design work and the leadership work was the more valuable thing for you to be doing, if you believe that that was the highest leverage use of your time, you would have no issue explaining that to them. And that should be what you do. You should communicate that to them when your time starts to shift as a leader, right? Because the guilt is the signal that you still believe underneath it all. Not that they believe. It's not their job to know that. Like, it's your job to explain that to them. But if you don't even believe it, it's hard for you to explain it, right? Because underneath all of this, you still believe that the doing work is more valuable than the leading work, and that your worth is the output that you're producing. And so as long as that's the belief that you have running in the background of your head, you're going to feel guilty every single time you step away from the execution. No matter how senior your role is, no matter how capable your team is, you're just going to continue to think that, well, the doing work is more valuable, and the team is not going to think I'm valuable here unless I do the doing work. And so you have to fundamentally understand that your highest value is not the doing work anymore. That's your team's value, right? And the way out of this isn't to just try to push through the guilt. It's really to start to shift the belief that created that concept, that idea, that belief, right? So I worked with a client a few years ago. She was a visionary founder. She was really brilliant at coming up with ideas that really moved her organization forward, right? Like, she knew that her highest value was coming up with $1 million ideas. She used to say that to me all the time. Like, I would say, what's your highest value? Coming up with $1 million ideas. I'm like, okay, amazing. But she also knew that her best thinking happened in coffee shops. Okay, not working from home, not in her office, but coffee shops specifically. Like, something about like the ambient noise and the lack of specific interruptions, but like still being able to see people, but also the separation from the building where everyone needed something from her in the office, right? That's where those $1 million ideas came from, was coffee shop days. And so when we started to work together, like, she was probably getting a few hours of that uninterrupted thinking time every single week, right? The coffee shop days were more like coffee shop hours, right? And the rest of her time was being consumed by the team, decisions that they would need her to make, questions that they had for her, just the general pull of everyone kind of needing something from her. And so she was still doing a lot of work, right? Almost none of it was work that she should be doing. And so our goal together became 3 coffee shop days a week for her. That was the metric, right? But here's the part that was really important. We didn't just make this her private goal. And some leaders would do that because they would feel shame. They would feel guilt. Like, what, coffee shop days? My team is going to think that I'm just like, it's just lounging around. Well, number one, so what? And number two, you don't understand the value of your coffee shop days then, right? Like, if this is the highest value use of your time, then it should not be something that is kept in private or anything to be ashamed of, right? And so when we made this goal, we made it a team metric. Her whole team knew that these 3 uninterrupted coffee shop days a week is what we were trying to collectively protect, because they understood that that would help them be more autonomous. And they understood that when she came back from those coffee shop days, she had a new idea, the next big product, the next thing that they were going to get to build together, or the thing that was going to drive revenue even higher, right? Her thinking time had a direct line to their opportunity for growth. Right? And so they protected it like it was their job, because it was, right? And so they use that as a metric. How much coffee shop time a week is she getting, and how can we continue to grow that coffee shop time, right? And once we were all on the same page, like, that guilt evaporated, but not because she just like powered through it, because she was able to communicate the value of her designing work, and that became visible and it became shared with the entire team, right? And the team wasn't wondering what she was doing anymore. They knew, and they were actively running interference so that they could protect it, so that she could do that most valuable thing, right? And that is what's possible when you genuinely understand and can communicate the value of your leadership work, right? And when you understand that your highest contribution to the team is no longer in the doing, but actually in the thinking, the designing, the building of a team that can execute without you, the guilt will start to lose its stronghold on you, right? Not because you've lowered your standards, but because you've actually raised them to the new role, right? You decided that your team deserves a leader who is actually capable of leading, not just a more experienced version of themselves doing the same work, right? And once you've made that shift, you can start to say it out loud. Like, my job is to think, my job is to lead you all, my job is to design the future of the company that we're all building together. And your job as the team is to execute it and make that vision that we have become a reality. And both of us doing our real jobs is what makes everything work, right? And if one of us is not doing our actual job, none of this will move forward, right? And there's no guilt in that, right? So what is your real job? Well, we've talked a lot about that today, right? The hardest part of moving from doer to leader is that the results of your work often become invisible, right? So when you write a report, you can see it, but when you're just developing someone's ability to write the report, the outcome, the output looks the same for them, right? The process was entirely different, and nobody hands you a gold star for it anymore, right? So you're probably struggling with that shift of like not seeing that progress for yourself. You're going to start to see it for other people though, right? So leadership development is often slow and frustrating, and sometimes just not as sexy as some of the other parts of work and running a business and doing a job, right? And the struggle here is that your team member is probably going to do it worse than you would have for a while, right? And your job is to let that happen and set guardrails that are clear enough to catch real problems without having to interfere and catch every tiny imperfection. Like, because your job is no longer to produce the best work on the team. Your job is to build a team that produces great work, including, and I'll say especially, when you're not there, right? And that's an entirely fundamentally different definition of success. And until you update it in your head, delegation and getting other people to do the work is always going to feel like a loss, right? So before you can delegate effectively, there's a question that you might want to ask yourself for reflection after today's episode. Like, who am I if I am not the one doing the work, right? Because that's really what's on the table. Not doing the task anymore, not doing the timeline, not whether your team member is ready, but really questioning, like, who am I if I'm not the one doing the work, right? So the leaders who figure out delegation aren't the ones who found the perfect framework. They were the ones who really got comfortable with this new version of their value and their identity, and really starting to make that shift, recognizing what hard work really is, and that hard work just looks different now. So if you are on this journey to delegating and really shifting your identity and becoming a real leader that doesn't do the work, but actually helps people become capable of doing the work, right? Your team's capability is now the measurement of your success, right? And the sooner that you understand that, the easier that things will get. But if you want to get better at delegation, I'm going to put some links in the show notes. We have delegation scripts. We have a delegation class coming up. These are all things that are going to help you practically start to improve making this identity shift and shifting from doing the work to designing and leading the work. So I'll put that in the show notes for you. If this was helpful for you, I would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, share this with a friend, share this with a colleague. It's so helpful for us to reach more people, reach more people who, want to make sure that they're leading people effectively, that they're creating work environments that don't suck. That's really my whole mission here at Sorta Bossy, is like, how do we work environments that don't suck? Well, we start with leaders and making sure that they're not creating toxic work environments, right? And that starts with you and it starts with me. And I'm so glappy. That was a new word that I created for this episode. I'm so glappy that you are here with us. And I hope that you stay bossy.